She went on a blind date with only $5 and left with the heart of a billionaire. Angela Brooks stepped into the Magnolia Room, her hands clutching a worn purse that held only $5. Her heart raced. The golden lights shimmered, silverware clinked softly. Everything around her felt too elegant, too far from the life she knew. The man she had met on a dating app saw her from across the room. One quick glance, then he turned and walked away. Not a word. Her phone buzzed. A short message appeared. "You're not what I'm looking for." Angela stood there, in a room glowing with warmth but filled with cold stares. People whispered. Some even laughed. Every chuckle felt like a blade cutting through her pride. She lifted her chin, swallowing back tears. "I'm fine," she told herself, but her hand trembled, gripping the thin purse, the last thing holding her dignity together. Across the room, William Hartman, the billionaire whose mansion she quietly cleaned for years, paused his meeting. His eyes lingered on her longer than they should have. In that restaurant where everyone looked down on her, one man finally saw her. If you've ever been judged or overlooked, stay until the end. This story will remind you that kindness still exists. Angela tried to hold herself together. She forced a small smile at the waiter. "I'll be leaving soon," she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded politely, but she could feel his pity. As she walked toward the door, the sound of laughter echoed behind her. A group of diners turned their heads, eyes following her like a shadow she could not escape. Her shoes clicked softly on the marble floor, the only sound that belonged to her. It wasn't just the $5 she had left, it was all the dignity she owned. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. She lifted her chin slightly, even as her world felt small, even as her chest ached. The emerald dress her friend had lent her suddenly felt too bright, too loud for someone who just wanted to disappear. Across the room, William Hartman watched her leave. The woman who had quietly cleaned his home for years now seemed like a stranger, fragile yet unbreakable. He saw her clutch that thin purse like a shield, holding on to what little pride she had left. And in that moment, something inside his chest cracked open, something he thought had died long ago. William stood before he even realized it. His business partner called after him, but he didn't answer. He left the table, the documents, the wine, everything that had once mattered. Every eye in the restaurant followed as he crossed the floor. Angela froze when she saw him coming. Her heart sank. "Mr. Hartman, He smiled gently. "Miss Brooks, may I sit?" She hesitated, her face pale with embarrassment. "You don't have to—" "You shouldn't eat alone," he interrupted softly. The whispers stopped. Forks rested on plates. Time seemed to hold its breath. William took the seat across from her, his movements calm, deliberate. Angela stared at the tablecloth, afraid to meet his eyes. He spoke again, quieter this time. "I saw what happened." Her lips parted, but no words came. The air between them was heavy, awkward, fragile, real. No one in that elegant room understood what they were witnessing. A man who had everything sitting beside a woman who had nothing, and treating her like she was worth the world. For the first time in years, William felt his heart beat for something that wasn't business. It beat for a moment of simple humanity. The waiter returned, uncertain. William didn't give him time to speak. "2 menus, please." Angela blinked, startled. "Sir, really, you don't need to—" "Maybe I want to," he said, voice steady but kind. He smiled, not the polite one he used for investors, but something softer. Angela exhaled slowly, shoulders still tense. "I can't afford this place," she murmured. "Then tonight, let me," he said simply. The waiter placed their menus down and slipped away quietly. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, somehow, conversation began. About food, about music, about nothing at all. It was awkward at first, but slowly, laughter crept in. William watched her talk with small gestures, her hands moving when she forgot to be careful. He noticed how her voice changed when she smiled. Warmer, lighter. For the first time in years, she wasn't just his housekeeper. She was a woman with dreams, humor, and quiet strength. As dessert came, silence returned, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, whole. And for the first time, William realized how long it had been since he felt peace, not the kind that comes from success, but from connection. The rain had started by the time Angela stepped outside. She pulled her coat close, the cold air biting at her skin. The city lights blurred through the drizzle. She turned once, unsure why, and saw him through the glass window. William, still sitting at the table, watching her go. He didn't wave. He didn't move. But his gaze followed her until she vanished into the rain. Her car was old, the kind that took 2 tries to start. The wipers squeaked with every pass. As she drove, her mind replayed the evening, the humiliation, the kindness, the strange gentleness in his eyes. In another life, she thought, maybe people like him and her could have met as equals. Maybe. Inside the restaurant, William remained seated long after she left. The untouched glass of wine before him reflected the empty chair where she had sat. He wasn't thinking about contracts or meetings. He was thinking about her, about the way she held her head high when the world laughed. Neither of them knew it yet, but that broken night had quietly stitched together the first thread of something neither had felt in years: hope. The next morning, Angela arrived at the Hartman estate as usual. The air smelled of rain and roses. She expected the house to be silent, like always, but William was already in the kitchen pouring coffee. "Good morning, Angela," he said softly. "Join me?" She froze for a second. This had never happened before. He was always distant, always in meetings or behind a closed door. Angela hesitated, then nodded. She took a seat at the far end of the table. The silence was strange, but not uncomfortable. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, landing gently on the two of them. He poured her a cup and said, "It's stronger than what you usually make." She smiled faintly. "That's all right. I could use something strong today." Their eyes met for a brief moment, and something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was recognition. William looked away first, clearing his throat. "You start early every day." "Every day," she replied. "Work doesn't clean itself." He smiled at her answer, and for the first time the house didn't feel cold. In that quiet morning light, a small warmth began to take root. Days passed. Each morning they found themselves sharing coffee again. Not planned, but natural. At first, the conversations were small. The weather, the news, the roses outside. Then, slowly, they began to talk about things that mattered. Her family in Savannah. His years spent alone after his wife's death. "Why baking?" he asked one morning. Angela smiled. "Because it's the only thing that makes people smile back." He laughed quietly. It was the first real laugh in years. Sometimes she told him stories from her old nursing job, or about her dream of owning a tiny bakery called Cinnamon and Light. He listened, really listened. No one had done that for her in a long time. The billionaire found comfort in her small dreams. And Angela, without realizing it, found strength in his attention. Each day, the moments stretched longer, the kind that make two lonely souls forget where they stand in life. When she left that morning, William stayed by the window, watching her walk down the garden path. For the first time, he didn't see an employee leaving work. He saw a woman who had quietly begun to change his world. A week later, William waited for her in the kitchen again. But this time, he wasn't holding coffee. He was holding a small envelope. "There's a charity gala next month," he said, handing it to her. "Come with me." Angela blinked, stunned. "Me?" He nodded. "You work harder than anyone I know. You deserve to enjoy one evening." She laughed nervously. "I don't belong there, Mr. Hartman. That's your world, not mine." "You belong anywhere you stand," he replied, his tone steady. Silence filled the room. Angela looked down, tracing the edge of the envelope with her fingers. She imagined the elegant people, the whispers, the stares. Her heart said yes, but fear whispered louder. William noticed her hesitation and smiled. "Think about it. The offer doesn't expire." She looked up, and their eyes met again. In his gaze, there was no pity, only quiet respect. Later, alone in her small apartment, Angela set the envelope on the table. She touched it gently, the way one touches something too precious to claim. For the first time in years, she wondered what it might feel like to be seen, not for what she did, but for who she was. When Angela told Carmen about the invitation, her friend's eyes went wide. "You're really going to a gala with him?" Angela laughed, shaking her head. "I don't even have a dress." Carmen disappeared into her closet and returned holding a navy blue gown. "It's simple, but it'll make them stare for the right reasons." Angela touched the fabric. Soft, smooth, beautiful. "I can't wear this." "You can," Carmen said firmly, "and you will." That evening, Angela stood before her mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she fixed her hair. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her shape without trying too hard. For a moment, she didn't see the cleaner from the mansion. She saw a woman who had survived, who had earned every scar and smile. "Maybe it's okay to shine once," she whispered to her reflection. She took a slow breath and looked down at the small bracelet on her wrist, a gift from her late husband. "Wish me luck," she murmured. Outside, the night was quiet, but somewhere deep inside, something long asleep began to wake. A quiet confidence, fragile yet real. Tomorrow, she would walk into a world that never expected her to belong. The night of the gala arrived. The Magnolia Ballroom glowed with chandeliers and the shimmer of wealth. Angela stepped out of the car, her heart pounding. Cameras flashed, voices murmured. William extended his hand. "Ready?" She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. As they entered, the crowd parted. Not in welcome, but in curiosity. Whispers rippled through the room. "Is that his maid?" someone whispered. "She works for him, right?" Angela heard every word. Her throat tightened, but she lifted her chin. William felt her hand tremble and tightened his grip. "We walk in together," he said quietly. The lights reflected off her navy dress as they crossed the marble floor. She could feel eyes burning into her back, but his calm presence steadied her. They stopped by the piano. He offered her champagne. She refused politely, smiling faintly. "I'm fine." He nodded, pride flickering in his eyes. "You're more than fine." Angela turned slightly, watching the glittering crowd, all laughter, jewels, and shallow talk. And then she smiled, not for them, but for herself. For the first time in her life, she stood in a room that said she didn't belong, and she stood anyway. The music softened as they moved through the crowd. Angela tried to stay calm, but every whisper cut deeper. Then a woman's voice called out behind them, smooth, sharp, and cold. "William," she said, "who is your little friend?" Angela turned. The woman was elegant, silver hair, pearls glowing under the lights. Eleanor Hartman, William's mother. For a moment, no one spoke. The crowd waited, sensing tension. William's jaw tightened. "Mother," he said quietly, "this is Angela Brooks." Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Your housekeeper?" Angela wanted the floor to swallow her. Before she could answer, William spoke again, firm and clear. "She's the woman I love." The room fell silent. No one moved. Even the music seemed to stop. Eleanor's expression froze, disbelief hardening into anger. Angela felt her knees weaken, but she stayed still, her hand trembling in William's. He turned toward her, eyes steady, as if telling her she wasn't alone. Around them, cameras clicked. Someone whispered, "Did he say love?" Angela stood there, heart pounding, every instinct screaming to run, but she didn't move. She stayed beside him, knowing that one sentence had just changed both their lives. By morning, the headlines had already spread. Billionaire and his maid. The scandal at the Hartman Gala. The photos showed Angela's nervous smile beside William's calm face. The captions called her a gold digger, a charity case, a joke. At the grocery store, strangers whispered. At church, friends turned away. Even online, her picture was everywhere. Mocked, analyzed, judged. William's phone never stopped ringing. Board members, reporters, family. They called him reckless. They called her a mistake. Through it all, Angela stayed quiet. She kept working, cleaning, baking, trying to live as if the noise outside didn't exist. But every headline stole a little more of her peace. Sometimes, when no one was looking, she cried in the laundry room, the only place that still felt private. William tried to reassure her. "This will pass," he said. But she could see the tension in his eyes, the weight on his shoulders. Voice. Love, when real, attracts storms before peace. And the storm had only just begun. The boardroom was colder than usual that morning. William sat at the head of the table, his directors lined up across from him. Men who had known him for years, now looking at him as if he were a stranger. "William," one of them said, voice clipped, "this relationship is hurting the company. Investors are nervous." Another added, "You need to end it, or the board will take action. We can't afford your personal choices to ruin our reputation." He listened silently, hands folded, face unreadable. When they were done, he simply said, "I understand your concerns." Then he stood, "But I won't end it." Gasps, murmurs. Someone muttered, "You're throwing it all away." Later, his mother came to his office. "You're ruining the family name," she hissed. "People are laughing at us." William looked at her, calm, tired, certain. "For the first time, I don't care what people say." Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Then you're no son of mine." She turned and left, heels striking the marble floor like thunder. He didn't stop her, because deep down he knew. Losing her approval hurt less than losing Angela. Angela couldn't sleep that night. The noise, the judgment, the guilt, it was too much. She sat at her small kitchen table, a blank sheet of paper before her. The words came slowly. "You need your world more than you need me." Her hand trembled as she wrote. She told him she was grateful, that what they shared had been real, but she couldn't let him lose everything for her. When morning came, she drove to the mansion one last time. The sky was pale gray, the air heavy. She walked through the empty halls, leaving no trace except the letter on the coffee table. Beside it, she placed the bracelet he had once admired, her way of saying goodbye without words. Hours later, William returned. He saw the letter first, then the empty space where her things had been. He sat down slowly, unfolded the paper, and read her words until they blurred. His hand shook. A single tear fell onto the signature, her name fading beneath it. The house was silent, except for the sound of his breathing breaking into sobs he hadn't allowed himself in years. Days passed, but time felt frozen. William wandered through his mansion like a ghost. Everything was spotless. Every surface gleamed, just as Angela had always kept it. But now, it all felt wrong. Too clean. Too quiet. He paused at the kitchen table, staring at the second coffee cup she used to hold. He remembered her laughter, the way she stirred her sugar twice before taking a sip. Her absence echoed in every corner. He tried to work. The meetings, the calls, the numbers, none of it mattered. His words came out hollow. His signature meant nothing. At night, he walked through the halls alone, stopping by the terrace where they had shared sunrise coffee. Only the cold wind greeted him. He looked around the grand rooms that once defined success and whispered, "What good is any of this if there's no one to share it with?" Voice. He had wealth, but not warmth. The words hung in the empty air, truth heavier than silence. In the distance, the city lights flickered, bright, unreachable, and in that vast, perfect house, William finally understood how empty riches could feel. The morning light crept across the mirror. William stood there, staring at his own reflection. The suit, the tie, the man who once believed success could fill an empty heart. He loosened the tie slowly. It felt like taking off armor. The face that stared back at him was tired, older, but honest. He whispered to himself, "It's time to live for something real." He walked through his study, past the framed awards and business headlines. They no longer meant anything. On his desk lay the letter Angela had written. He read it again, each line carving deeper into him, not as pain, but as clarity. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. Then he picked up the phone. "Call the board," he said. "We're scheduling a press conference." For once his voice held no hesitation. He knew the cost. He knew what he was about to lose, but he also knew that the life he had built without love was not life at all. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, washing the cold marble floors with warmth. And, for the first time in years, William Hartman chose himself, not the man the world expected him to be. The room was packed with cameras, reporters, flashes bursting like fireworks. William stepped up to the microphone, calm and composed. "Good morning," he began. "I know why you're here." He paused, letting the murmurs fade. "I'm stepping down as CEO of Hartman Technologies," he said. "I choose love over legacy." The room exploded. Questions shouted, lights flashing. He continued anyway. "For years, I chased success. I thought money could replace meaning, but it can't. What matters most is not what we build, it's who we share it with." At that exact moment, across town, Angela was frosting cupcakes in her kitchen. The TV played softly in the background. When she heard his voice, her hand froze midair. Tears filled her eyes as she saw him standing at that podium, saying the words she never thought he would. Reporters demanded names, details, scandal. William smiled faintly. "Her name doesn't matter to you," he said, "but, to me, she's everything." Angela sank into a chair, the tears finally falling. He had chosen her, not in secret, not in silence, but in front of the entire world. Weeks later, Angela signed the papers for her small business loan. Her hands trembled as she held the keys to a tiny storefront on the corner of Pine Street. She named it Cinnamon and Light. The walls still smelled of fresh paint and hope. She worked from dawn to night, mixing, baking, cleaning, smiling through exhaustion. There were days with no customers and nights she cried over bills, but it was hers, every inch of it. One morning, a bouquet arrived. Soft white lilies with a note. No money, just pride. W. Angela smiled through tears. "This time," she whispered, "I'll build it myself." Her first customer was a young mother with a baby on her hip. Angela handed her a warm loaf, refusing the change. "You'll pay me next time." The woman's eyes filled with gratitude, and just like that, word spread. People came, not just for the pastries, but for the feeling inside that little shop. At the end of each day, Angela would look around and whisper to herself, "See, I made something real too." It wasn't a mansion, but it was full of life, and it smelled like beginnings. One quiet morning, as Angela arranged pastries in the display, she heard the doorbell chime. She turned and froze. William stood there, wearing a white shirt dusted with flour. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. He smiled. "Then where else would I go?" She didn't move, didn't trust what she was seeing. He looked different. No suit, no bodyguards, no weight of status. Just a man. "I've been helping a friend at a soup kitchen," he said. "Turns out, I'm not terrible at kneading dough." Angela tried not to smile. "So, now you bake?" "I learned fast." He stepped closer, glancing at the sign above the counter. "Cinnamon and Light. You did it." "I did," she said quietly. They stood there for a long moment, the smell of sugar and coffee wrapping around them like memory. Finally, he reached into his pocket and pulled out her old bracelet, the one she left behind. "You forgot this," he said. Angela took it, her throat tightening. "I thought I gave it up." He shook his head. "Some things find their way back." For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone anymore. From that day on, William kept showing up. At first, to help, then just to stay. He swept the floors, washed dishes, carried boxes of flour. People who recognized him couldn't believe their eyes. The billionaire in an apron, laughing behind the counter. Angela tried to protest at first. "You don't have to do this." He looked at her, smiling. "Maybe I want to." And they found a rhythm, her baking, his serving, their laughter blending with the hum of the oven. Customers loved them. Some came just to see the unlikely pair, the woman with warm hands and the man who'd traded gold for grace. In quiet moments, they would sit together at the back table, sipping coffee from mismatched mugs. He'd ask, "Do you ever miss the mansion?" She'd shake her head. "Do you?" He'd smile. "Not anymore." One afternoon, as sunlight poured through the window, Angela wiped flour from her face and said, "We're partners now, in every way." William looked at her, eyes soft. "Yes," he said, "in every way that matters." And for the first time, both of them felt what true success finally meant: peace. It happened on a quiet morning, the smell of cinnamon filling the bakery. Angela was frosting cupcakes when she turned and found William kneeling on the kitchen floor. His hands were dusted with flour, his shirt rolled at the sleeves, and in his palm sat a small sapphire ring. Her breath caught. "What are you doing?" He looked up, smiling softly. "Marry me. Not for what I have, but for who we are." For a heartbeat, she couldn't move. The bakery, the ovens, the city outside, everything faded. Her hand went to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling before she could stop them. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling. Then louder, laughing through tears, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He stood, slipping the ring onto her finger. It was simple, beautiful, like her. She threw her arms around him, the flour from his shirt dusting her face. They both laughed, the sound soft and full. Outside, customers peeked through the window, clapping when they realized what had happened. Inside, Angela looked at him and said, "You've already given me everything that matters." He whispered back, "No, love. You gave that to me first." The wedding was small. Just family, friends, and sunlight spilling over the backyard of William's sister's house. Angela wore a cream dress, her hair simply pinned. William stood under a wooden arch wrapped in ivy. When she walked toward him, his eyes glistened. Eleanor was there too. At first, distant. Then, when the ceremony ended, she stepped forward. She hugged Angela, her voice breaking. "Thank you for giving me my son back." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "And thank you for letting me love him." Amanda, William's sister, began a soft gospel hymn. The melody floated over the garden, blending with laughter and the hum of summer air. They exchanged vows. Not grand, not poetic, but honest. "I promise," Angela said, "to build every tomorrow with kindness." "I promise," William answered, "to never stop seeing you." And when they kissed, the guests cheered. It wasn't a society wedding, no reporters, no diamonds, just two people who had survived life's storms and found calm in each other. And as the sun began to set, Angela whispered to him, "I still can't believe this is real." He smiled. "It's as real as you've always been." Their life together was nothing like the world expected, and everything they wanted. William began teaching history at the community college. He loved the chalk on his hands, the eager faces, the quiet respect in the room. His students didn't see a billionaire. They saw a man who spoke about lessons that mattered: compassion, legacy, and truth. Angela spent her mornings in the bakery, her afternoons teaching widowed women how to bake for a living. She often said, "Bread rises best when someone believes in it." Their days were simple: shared breakfasts, long walks, late-night talks about everything and nothing. Sometimes, when she closed the shop, she'd see him waiting outside with 2 coffees in hand. "Trade you," he'd say, "a coffee for a smile." They didn't travel the world or chase grand dreams. They built a small, steady happiness, the kind that doesn't shout, but lasts. They had known emptiness, loneliness, humiliation. Now they knew peace. And in that quiet peace they found what neither riches nor comfort had ever given them: the joy of being fully, deeply seen. One afternoon, a young student came into the bakery, holding a book and smiling nervously. "Excuse me," he said. "You're Mrs. Hartman, right?" Angela wiped her hands on her apron. "Yes, can I help you?" "I'm in Professor Hartman's class," the student said. "He told us about someone who taught him what real success means." Angela raised an eyebrow. Did he now? The boy nodded eagerly. He said she showed him that kindness changes more lives than money ever will. She laughed softly, shaking her head. He's still teaching hearts, not just history. The student grinned. He told us to come try your cinnamon rolls, said they taste like hope. Angela smiled. Then he's exaggerating again. When the boy left, she looked toward the college across the street. Through the window, she could see William in his classroom, gesturing as he spoke. Their eyes met for a second, just long enough to share the quiet pride between them. She whispered, "He's still the man I said yes to, the one who sees people, not titles." Then she returned to her counter, the bell above the door ringing with every act of kindness that followed. A year later, they returned to where it all began, the Magnolia Room. The maitre d' looked up as they entered, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Welcome back," he said with a knowing smile. Angela laughed quietly. "It feels different this time." William nodded. "Because it is." They were seated by the same window, the city lights glowing just as before. But the air between them was warmer now. Steady, easy. As they ordered dessert, Angela looked around. The same kind of people filled the room. Elegant, distant. But this time, she didn't shrink beneath their gaze. "This time," she said softly, "I'm not afraid." William reached across the table, taking her hand. "I told you," he said smiling, "you belong anywhere you stand." The waiter brought their check, folded neatly beside a small rose in a vase, the same kind of rose that once sat untouched years ago. Angela smiled and leaned closer. "Funny how life brings us full circle." William nodded. "Maybe that's what love does. It takes what once hurt and turns it into peace." Outside, the night shimmered, and in the window's reflection they didn't see a maid and a billionaire, only two souls who had finally found home. The evening settled softly over their porch. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in gold and lavender. Angela leaned against William, her hand resting in his. Neither spoke for a while. The world felt still, peaceful. Then William said quietly, $5 bought me the greatest gift of my life." Angela turned to him, eyes warm. "Love doesn't need a price tag." He smiled, brushing his thumb over her fingers. "Maybe not," he said, "but I'll never forget how little you had, and how much you gave." She laughed softly. "All I gave was honesty." "That's what changed everything," he replied. The air smelled of cinnamon and summer rain. In the fading light, their shadows stretched together across the porch floor. Angela closed her eyes, whispering, "We were strangers once." "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, smiling, "we're home." The sun disappeared behind the trees, leaving only quiet, the kind that belongs to two hearts that no longer need words. Weeks later, envelopes began arriving at the bakery. Some were written in careful script, others typed with trembling hands. One began, "Your story gave me courage to love again." Another read, "I thought I was too old to start over, until I saw you." Angela and William sat by the counter each night, opening them one by one. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they cried. "This one's from Texas," she said, holding a letter to the light. "She lost her husband last year, said our story reminded her that hope doesn't die, it just sleeps." William nodded slowly. "We didn't mean to start anything," he said. "No," Angela answered, "but love has a way of spreading itself." They kept the letters in a wooden box under the counter, proof that their pain had turned into something healing. Each new envelope reminded them, sometimes, when you survive heartbreak, you don't just mend yourself, you mend others too. The bakery glowed brighter than ever that night. It was the first anniversary of Cinnamon and Light. Angela hung string lights around the windows while William arranged tables outside. Soon, the street filled with people, neighbors, students, friends. Laughter drifted through the air like music. Amanda brought a small choir from her church. Their voices blended with the hum of conversation, filling the night with warmth. William handed out pastries, his apron dusted with sugar. Angela stood beside him, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "Look at this," she whispered. "A year ago, it was just me and an empty shop." He smiled. "Now it's you, and everyone you've touched." When the music swelled, he took her hand. They stood together under the lights, faces illuminated, hearts steady. For once there was no crowd dividing them, only community, connection, and quiet joy. The lights shimmered above like stars brought down to earth, and for that one night, every soul there believed in love again. When the last guest left, the bakery was still glowing. Angela turned off the lights one by one, the hum of laughter still echoing in her chest. William waited by the door, his hand resting on the closed sign. She looked around. The tables, the counter, the tiny details they had built together. "It began with $5 and a broken heart," she said softly. He smiled, finishing her thought, and ended with a life rich in love. They switched off the final light. Outside, the sign Cinnamon and Light shimmered faintly in the dark. Angela leaned against him as they stepped into the quiet street. The city was asleep, but their hearts were wide awake. He whispered, "Thank you for staying." She smiled, "Thank you for seeing me." They walked home under the street lamps, their shadows intertwined. Behind them, the bakery stood like a promise, a reminder that from the smallest beginnings, something endless can grow. Sometimes it takes being humiliated with $5 in your purse to find your worth. Sometimes love finds us when we least expect it, when we finally dare to be seen. Angela and William's story began with shame, but ended with grace. They lost what the world called success and found what life truly means. Their love wasn't perfect, it was real, born from humility, courage, and choice. And that's what makes it beautiful. Some nights they still sit on their porch, sharing quiet smiles, watching the lights of the bakery flicker down the street. And in those moments, they know the richest lives are not built from money, but from meaning. If this story touched your heart, share it. Let someone else remember that love doesn't fade with age or failure. You are never too old, too poor, or too invisible to be loved, because somewhere, someone is waiting to see you, just as you are. And that's where every true story begins.